You've just entered the Savage Fitness Podcast. The following is a raw, unfiltered, no bullshit look at the fitness industry's most relevant and trending issues. Viewer discretion is advised.
Savage!
What's going on, Savages? CJ here, back with another Savage Talk Fitness Podcast, and I'm back with my good buddy, Dylan. This is his third time on the podcast. He was nice enough to have us over at his place. I'm going to be guest on his podcast that he just kicked off that he's not ready to let us know about. Apparently.
Almost. We're so close, man. We're so close.
Yeah, soon enough, we'll be announcing that. So if you enjoy Dylan, he's going to have his own thing coming on. It's not going to be completely fitness, but I think you'll enjoy some of the talk from him. I'm definitely going to be. So can I subscribe now? Even though nobody knows, can I go and actually?
I don't even know. It's not on YouTube or anything, so okay. I don't know. Yeah, we'll get it up soon.
This is going to be a really cool episode, and something that has been a theme of the talk recently with other fitness professionals, friends of mine. I know you've been heavy into this, is intensity. So we're going to dig into intensity today, and we'll start by giving just a basic understanding of what intensity is. We are also going to give you an understanding of what RPE means. So for anybody that's not familiar with that term, and then we're essentially going to be talking about a philosophy that kind of Dylan has been developing, or a thought process that he's been developing that I think is interesting. And I'd like to press him on a couple things, but I think this is really going to be some good banter. So let's start with intensity, man. I think you had a good definition a while ago. If you just gave the general public what exactly intensity is.
Yeah. Okay. So you have your overall just intensity, which is if you were to graph intensity on like an XY axis, you have basically two planes then within which it exists. You have just the intensity, which is how far away from your 1 rep max are you on a given movement. If your 1 rep max is 100 pounds, then you lifted 90 pounds on that lift, then you would be at 90% intensity. So it's basically just one plane. How close are you to your 1 rep max? And then you have relative intensity, which introduces a different plane. It's kind of your y-axis, which is volume. So it exists on the spectrum of overall intensity and volume. So as you do more volume, if you were to do 50 pounds on that lift, but you did it for 10 reps, then you'd be pushing that, you would be operating at 50% intensity, but because you did it for more reps, you were at a higher relative intensity.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And essentially, and a lot of people, well, there's two types. You see in the strength community, there's quite a bit of the understanding of, I'm going to come at this at X percentage of 1 rep max. There's a very kind of a calculated approach. But then we also maybe make an argument that even in the, general population or the traditional side of gym goers, they understand something that's more of a nuanced, intuitive nature of like, go till you feel the burn, or, go till you feel the pump or whatever. But there's kind of an intrinsic, level. But all of that is ways of trying to describe intensity to allow us how much work or how much overload essentially you're getting to in a given bout, right?
Right. So yeah, the guys that are like, go until you hit failure, they're just saying do 100% relative intensity. So it doesn't matter how much weight you picked, you just keep doing reps until you fail. That means you're at 100% relative intensity.
Now, this brings us to another definition. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I just wanted this to be a brief, kind of overview so we can get to the real conversation. But that brings us to RPE. So rate of perceived exertion, which essentially is a kind of a relative intensity measurement chart. Essentially, it's a way for us to a little bit more scientifically look at how you're feeling on a given set, right? Or how difficult that was. How would you describe RPE?
Well, RPE is a subjective measure of intensity where you can basically gauge your percentage of you're basically gauging your relative intensity based off of feel. And so it's going to account for the variations that you might have day by day. Because if you were to go based off of only a relative intensity chart, and let's say your one rep max and your deadlift is 100 pounds, well, that's on your best day. And after a whole week of training and beating yourself down, I doubt you could pull that 100 pounds. So RPE-based training is going to account for that and make it so that you can adjust it per the day. So if you walk into the gym and you feel like dog shit, you can lift and you can basically finish your set and say, that was like a 6 out of 10. That was a 7 out of 10. And so the RPE scale is always on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being 100% you could not have done a single more rep. That was that was 100% relative intensity for the given day. And 1 being you could have done a lot more. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was confusing. I realized when I was saying this, when you say just the term relative intensity, it's easy to think of it as like just it's more intuitive, but essentially relative intensity is relative to what your one rep is versus this is more based off of your feeling and a rate of your, and I think Israel and some of these guys call it like reps in reserve, right? It's how many reps could you have done at post? Right.
And that's how I actually don't really fully have a really great understanding of the difference between the two. When I started RPE training, I actually was basing it off of reps in reserve kind of a thing. Like if I finished a set and I thought, man, I could have maybe done one more, but it would have been really hard, then I would call it an RPE 9.
Yeah.
And that's still kind of the way that I like to do RPE. It's more reps in reserve than it is RPE.
Yeah. We're the same way. Well, here's what's interesting is that and you were a big inspiration to this. Julian was talking about this a lot. I think we had an introduction to barbell medicine through our little friend group that it was kind of interesting. This really brought me away from percentages to a certain extent, right? So I was working with a couple of performance athletes, and when you're working with a strength athlete, as some people know, you've got to dial it in a little bit more. You got to be very careful with, overshooting it. If you hit that 10 RPE, which would be the 100%, that could really rob you from potential elsewhere. So I wanted to really make sure that I was kind of riding the line of the recipe correctly. And so this pulled me away from percentages because I recognized that, like you said, what 80% is that day could change. It could swing. And I also like the idea of holding the athlete accountable for the intuitive nature of their training. They need to understand what an 8 feels like or what that is for them. Because, think about this. Like, how on earth do you account for, there are people that have such muscular endurance that they seem to be able to hit, say, a particular intensity measure like a 7 or something, and they seem to be able to cruise, versus people that have that kind of, once they're there, it's boom, shut down.
Right.
So really understanding yourself to a level is clutch here.
That's a good point.
Now, you're introducing to me, this is where it's going to get really interesting. And you're suggesting, now we've got to pull away from strength a little bit, and we've got to talk hypertrophy. Most of you out there, you want gains, all right, at some level. And so for all you aesthetic folks or somebody trying to encourage muscle growth, Dylan is suggesting that we could look at it a layer deeper than just RPE or percentages or any of that. So give me your take on intensity for hypertrophy.
Yeah, this is specific. Again, like you said, this is specifically for hypertrophy, because if you were chasing strength, you would take a different strategy to all of this. So this is for hypertrophy. I am of the opinion, especially nowadays, and especially because I live a pretty hectic, busy life, and I want to get maximum gains in the minimum amount of time, I'm of the opinion that focusing on the sweet zone, I'll call it, where you're
the G spot.
We got to hit the G spot. Man. We got to get the G spot. Yep. And I would say that that's somewhere around like an RPE of 7 to 9, and dragging out the number of reps performed at 7 to 9 to the absolute maximum. Because I think what happens with a lot of training programs, especially, and now this is more of like directed towards the training programs that are on like a bodybuilding.com that are really basic and beginner stuff. They'll say like 3 sets of 10, and you're going to go in there, you're going to do your 3 sets of 10. And for the first 7 or 8 reps of that set, you're probably getting almost no adaptability from that movement until it gets challenging enough that it starts causing your body to perform whatever cascade of events it has to go through in order to adapt and therefore make gains. And so I'm saying, if that sweet spot is between 7 and 9, how do I get the most amount of volume that is between a 7 and 9 RPE? Because the problem is every set you're going to start and you're going to do a bunch of reps that are really just warming you up and getting you ready to do the ones where you're at a higher fatigue level to where it's challenging. So I'm a big proponent of using things like drop sets and forced reps and other measures to add more volume that happens to be in the sweet zone. Because at the end of the week, if you did 1,000 reps, but none of those reps were challenging, then you didn't do shit to gain in terms of hypertrophy. You may have burned more calories, but you didn't really effectively gain a whole lot of muscle.
Right. Yeah, and we, even with the calories, that's interesting, because I would even make an argument that training at the higher intensity has a more residual, calorie
that
effect.
Too. Yeah. No, I meant you burn more calories than sitting on your ass.
Oh, yeah. So it's not like it's completely useless. And and by the way, and I know I don't want to go sideways with this, that is something very important for anybody listening. If there's anybody that's completely sedentary right now, that maybe, whether it's blood pressure stuff, like blood glucose, whatever, I can tell you right now that the research suggests that literally doing something as simple as getting up and walking, making an intentional walk can get rid of some of this stuff like really quickly. You don't have to train like a fucking CrossFit, savage. Anyway, I thought that was interesting, because there's a point at which health, I think, it's pretty easily achieved, or there's a lot of things that are pushed away. Diabetics, for instance, guys, you don't have to strict freaking paleo diet and all this shit, but like some basic changes. All right.
100%. No, I love that sentiment of that message. Go for a walk. It's like my favorite thing to do, actually. I love going for walks.
Except for like he does a drop set. It's like walk to RPE 7, and then he gets the G spot. And then it's a sprint. And
then it's a sprint, baby. Keep going. Drag out that G spot.
So this is interesting, and we've had a little bit of banter on this already, but I want to kind of throw some things in there. I'm curious, and I'm really trying to wrap my mind around this. If those of you listening, I literally just kind of came in contact with this, maybe an hour ago. So this is new to me too. I've known that obviously there's a level of change that's occurred above lactic threshold, essentially. So and this is obvious. At the point at which it's uncomfortable, we know that the overload principle suggests that we are going to adapt. We have to do something that our body is unaccustomed to. Hell, even P90X knew to confuse your muscles.
True.
But where I'm not fully understanding, because I need to be able to first separate the difference between what you're saying. If I did 12 reps to achieve RPE 9, meaning I could have only done one more, versus doing, say, 12 reps to a 7 and then continuing to do another 5 reps to get to the 9. So that'd be 17 reps essentially there. Why do you think, granted, yes, I'm doing more reps, but I would do more weight accumulative to that, through the 12 than I would, or actually maybe I would do. I'm trying to think if I'm like disproving. I'm trying to decide which one does more weight. It does. You would assume that the 17 reps would be more weight, but my question is, will it be, because obviously when you lift heavier, it's more, you get more bang for each rep.
True. So there I agree with you. Okay. So if you were to do a set of 10 at an RPE 9 versus if you did a set of 10 at an RPE 9 immediately followed by a lighter set, arbitrarily lighter, it doesn't matter exactly how much, just a little bit lighter, so that you can do exactly 5.
So do exactly what I would do normally is what you're saying, but then
right.
Okay.
Then add in the drop set, basically.
Got you.
So you're going to do your sets and reps. And this is kind of the thing that I'm playing around with, which is this isn't new. Drop sets aren't new. I didn't invent this, obviously. I'm just finding ways and trying to be creative about finding ways to add in more useful volume. And that starts at the beginning of the workout, where my warm-ups, or better yet, this is actually the part that I'm really pumped about. Okay. I think people think about their programming, especially, again, this is specifically for hypertrophy. People really think about their programming in terms of sets and reps prescribed. And there have been some coaches that like to offer a range. Instead of going 3 sets of 10, they're going to go 3 sets of 10 to 12. But I'm saying be even more flexible than that. So just start with some weight. Do it until you start to feel that it's challenging. It doesn't matter how many reps exactly you performed in that set, right? A lot of people are going to count to 10 and call it good, even though they got nothing out of that set. Well, even on my warm-ups, I'm going to start like, okay, I did 10, but I didn't really feel a burn. So I'm going to go ahead and do another 3 or 4 reps and just kind of go until I start to feel that burn and start to make that mind-muscle connection. And so this is me talking about kind of being more adaptable in your training. You don't have to do 3 sets of 10. You don't have to do 4 sets of 8. Like, I'm saying that's so rigid that it really, if you want to train exactly 3 sets of 10, you have to be really good at finding the exact right load where 3 sets of 10 is challenging. But because it's really hard to find that exact load when you're talking hypertrophy stuff, because there's so much variety in stuff that you do, and you'd have to keep a really detailed journal of everything, which nobody does. And so what I'm saying is,
if you sign up with Savage Coaching, you'll have an app that does keep track of all of this information for you.
Absolutely.
Shameless
there
plug.
You go. Yeah, do it, man. And hey, and not everybody has that access to Savage Coaching, which you should. But
act now and you get basically the regular price, because we're not doing a sale right now. Okay. I hear what you're saying. And this is where you and I sometimes, we get to this point sometimes. I love, because I love your you have a very big picture philosophical look at the industry and I think you can speak in big paintbrushes. My question though is, boots on the ground, I'm talking to real people. I'm talking to people that don't explore the mindset like you. They don't have the experience like you. And even if they do have experience, they not to that kind of level. Like, there are people that need prescriptions. So the real question for me is, that's all good, but how on earth do I, outside of saying, because I would do the sets and reps, obviously, when I'm doing prescriptions, and I would say, again, RPE 9 or whatever it is.
Right.
Outside of that, how do I explain, you know what I mean? What's the next step that I take that I can assign to that person?
So is the question how can just your everyday average audience, everyday person utilize this kind of concept in their life?
Yeah. Or let's speak from a coach's standpoint, if I were writing a program right now for one of those people, how would it be listed or how would it be explained to get your point across, essentially? I do love the idea, just in general, by the way, of people stopping thinking of your overall sets and reps. You're looking at that and start thinking, well, how many useful reps did I get? I like that.
Yeah.
And again, I called it the RPE inside the RPE, was like once I got to where I was going,
I like
the next
That's
layer would be like if you got to your 7, but now the system started over, but anyway, I'm also weird like that. So how do I write that? How do I implement that with a client?
So
besides saying, go feel it, bro. Cause that's my worry.
Right. That's what we're basically saying. I don't think that that's the best for everybody. For me, I love to just go and feel it out, and that's just the intuitive nature of me. And I like to play it by ear like that. But I think that there is application for somebody saying, I think that you could divide it into each exercise into 3 sections of it. You have your warm up for that exercise, you have the bulk of the work of that exercise, and then you have a drop set at the end. And the warm up, you can kind of just say, do a light weight around 10 to 20 reps and just feel the muscles and work until you start to feel that connection to the muscles, or you start to feel that little bit of burn, and do like 2 sets of that. And then you could prescribe your 3 sets of 10. I'm just using 3 sets of 10 as, that's the baseline that everybody likes to use, right? Yeah. Then you have like the bulk of your work, get them into like the right, wherever you want to get them for whatever phase of training you're on, right? Whether you're trying to get them a little bit stronger, whatever it is that you're working on, that could be the bulk of the work. 3 sets of 5, 5 sets of 5, 3 sets of 10, whatever it is, right? And then you can do those per RPE, and then set it down, give them a little bit of, a lighter weight, start with 10, drop, and then drop down. And that's one way that you could prescribe this methodology, right? Yeah. If I were to really try to get it tangible, that's how I'd say it is. I have like my warm-up section where it's like freewheel it, feel it until you burn, do the bulk of your work, and then set it out. And you will accumulate a ton of volume with that.
It reminds me, or it has a resemblance of the old kind of AMRAP style of strength training where, you do your last set of like AMRAP, and again, I know it's a little different, your drop sets here, but like, it does kind of remind me of that, and every bro knows what it's like to do, like, you did your sets of bench. We're like, I'm going to do one more burnout set.
Yeah.
Do the burnout set.
Yo, spot me close, man. Yeah. I'm going to do a burnout. Yeah.
Now, how do you, let's talk about safeties here, because we also know there's 2 types of people that exist. There's one, well, I say there's more than 2 people. Let's call these 2 categories though. The one is the Gen Pop person that literally has no intuition about themselves of what training intense looks like. So their concept of reps and reserves, or their concept of intensity they just haven't experienced enough, right? So let's put that person over here. Now on the other side, you've got the hardworking athlete, the young guy, they got all the intensity, all the, cock strong, go at this. But also that person, so on one hand, we have one person that runs the risk of us needing to be able to translate what it feels like to train hard enough. On the other hand, I need to keep this guy from burning up in the atmosphere, because I think a part of this is, what is the contingency for me having them hit RPE 10 as the coach, and then them not being able to train as frequently or something like that?
Yeah. And that's where I would say hire a coach, one who is very savage. But no, I mean, for real, I think that is absolutely the crux of the difficulty in my methodology that I'm developing here, is that some people are going to just inherently not push themselves hard enough. And then the other half are going to push themselves way too hard, and they're probably going to get hurt. Mm-hmm. So there has to be some kind of fail safe on either side. And I think that I think that there's room to play with that. But yeah, I think training at a red line intensity for all the time you're bound to be injured, and it really catches up with you, and you do need to modulate it and train smart. But on the other hand, never hitting red line ever, you will never change. You will never, train insane or remain the same, brah.
Yeah.
Lightweight, buddy.
Was that on a No Fear t-shirt? I don't know what company, but I know it had tribal on the sleeves. Yeah. So no, absolutely, man. And so
I guess I don't have the answers to that. I guess what I'm saying.
I do think that there's something that, because I'm really curious about setting up something within Savage Coaching that is I want to be able to look at intensity a different way. I mean, first of all, I love kind of creating our own concepts around different big segments, and kind of having our own style about it, assuming we're following the principles of logic that we know. But instead of me just taking, again, say the RPE scale, it'd be really cool to have a different kind of way of communicating this and to looking at this. And so I think this is the beginning of building a type of philosophy that I'd love to be able to explore with you. And even if you come up with some system or whatever, we'll license your system or whatever. But no, so I think there's something there. I think there's some meat on the bone. And it also shows us why we know that bro splits have been proven to be effective to a certain extent. If you look at most of the big hypertrophy researchers out there, they have to admit that as much as we love periodization, different undulation cycles or linear models or whatever, the truth is that if even if you're doing a bro split and you're training hard enough, we see progress. And it's, think about it. They were the ultimate intuitives from the beginning.
That's true.
They just went in and trained fucking hard, and they kind of picked exercise they wanted to, did the reps that they wanted to, and they trained, Now, granted, I'm not saying they're all, it's perfect. I'm not suggesting go do a bro split, but you know what I'm saying? It's interesting. And like that kind of speaks to some of this in a way, unlike somebody that came at it very structured where they said, I have to go 12 and then I'm going to do 10 and then I'm going to do, these guys were going in, and if they felt good, they were going hard as fuck. And where that one person might be missing the opportunity to do that.
Yeah.
Then the bros might have been fucking themselves because they were doing legs so hard that they couldn't walk for fucking a few days.
That's true too. Yeah. There is that balance there. One thing I know is that intensity is crucial in the quest for gains, and getting enough volume at a high enough intensity is a place that a lot of people slip. It's easy to fall. We said this earlier. Do you agree? Your thoughts on this? I believe that intensity, if we looked at all the major principles that go into programming, intensity is probably the most important, or the big elephant in the room. If you had, people say like, what's more important, sets or reps or whatever? The easy answer, a lot of people should say, I think for most of them, would be reps. But when you say reps, it's really effective reps. It's at the density of your set is what matters. Right? Yeah. So when people say what's more important, sets or reps, I would say intensity. Right. Exactly. It's really the number of reps at a given intensity. Yeah. Like sets versus reps. I mean, honestly, I kind of look at them as the same. It's sets times reps equals volume. And then how much of that was at a given intensity? That percentage is your total useful volume. Yeah. Everything else was warm up. You're really giving my wife fodder here, man. So with those late night bedroom sessions, and I'm like, well, I got to that high intensity quick. I thought that was the goal. She's like, no, where are the reps in reserve? That's not what counts. No, wonderful. All right, guys. Well, thanks, man. I think we're definitely going to have more talk on this. We're going to have, part 2, 3, who knows? I think intensity, we didn't really expect it to be this way, but I think as this conversation developed, like this has blown up into something that we think needs to be explored in a lot of different ways. So I'm excited to do that on your podcast, my podcast. We just got to keep the conversation going. So if you guys like this, do me a huge favor and subscribe, either Spotify, wherever you're listening, or YouTube if you prefer video format. And we will be back each week. We've got podcasts. I don't know how many each week, but at least one. So, all right. Thanks, man. Thank you.